are a really exceptional couple. So a little bit of background on Jim. He was born in Lamar, Iowa, which Iowa is a great place to be from, Jim, and earned a BA in mathematics and economics and his JD in international law, all from the University of Iowa. And he was a member of the Iowa Bar, and also he's a retired U.S. Navy. He and his wife were both career officers in the CIA, and both of them served mostly overseas in clandestine operations. And he was the chief of counterintelligence at the CIA headquarters in Langley. And his overseas assignments were all in the USSR, Austria, and Mexico. He speaks 4 foreign languages, so you can't say anything tonight that you won't understand. French, German, Russian, and Spanish. And he was assigned by the CIA to the George Bush School of Government and Public Service and College Station. And he is an officer in residence, was named an officer in residence in December of 1997. One thing that he mentioned in our interview, which I loved, is he said it was like his second career began as a professor, and it's one that he really deeply loves. And I thought that was a real testament to his time in the CIA and how much he loves teaching his students and also teaching former and current CIA officers. So I really love that about him. I think that you're going to love what he has to share, and we'll only have 1 billion questions for him, I'm sure. So I want to make sure that we have plenty of time for that. So please help me welcome Jim Olson.
Well, thank you, Catherine, for that very kind introduction. Good evening, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for inviting us to be with you tonight. Before doing anything else, I would like to reintroduce my wonderful partner in spine and in life, my wife, Mary. I'd also like to recognize a dear friend, my former tennis partner, our pastor at St. Thomas Aquinas College Station, later at St. William and Round Rock for many years, and now at St. John Newman, just down the road. German pronunciation. Father G. Wellham. Our topic tonight, at Catherine's request, is intelligence ethics. And that is not an oxymoron, because there are ethics in United States intelligence. I must say, though, that the world of espionage and covert action that Meredith and I lived in for 31 years raises some extreme and esoteric moral and ethical issues. And I think about these questions a lot. They go to my core as a person. And they are inseparable from the profession that we chose. And that Paul chose. Nice to have you with us, Paul. Colleague. In many ways, ladies and gentlemen, my life has been a paradox. Point one of the paradox. The most important things in my life, along with my country and my family, are my Catholic faith and my honor. Point two of the paradox. I spent my entire CIA career lying, cheating, stealing, manipulating, and deceiving. This feels a little bit like confession tonight. So our question this evening is an important one. Can these 2 points be reconciled? Can a person be a spy for our country and a good Catholic at the same time? My shorthand version of what we're going to be talking about tonight is how dirty are we willing to get our hands, if we're willing to get them dirty at all. Spying is ancient. It goes back to biblical times and before. I think most of us here are familiar with the story from the book of Joshua. About how Joshua, preparing for the conquest of Canaan, sent 2 spies ahead. In thanks for her protection of the spies, was spared along with her family when the Israelites captured Jericho. Does America need spies? Does America need intelligence? How many terrorist attacks against Americans do you think have been thwarted because of our intelligence? The answer is many. How many American soldiers' lives have been saved on battlefields around the world because we had superior intelligence on our enemies? That answer is also many. So if we can accept that America does in fact need intelligence, then I believe that we also must accept that America needs spies. America and I are proud that we had this opportunity to serve our country as spies for our entire careers. But what do spies do? What have spies always done? They lie, cheat, steal, manipulate, and deceive. I lie every day of my career because Mary and I were undercover. I lied to my own parents about what I worked, where I worked, and what I did. We lied to our own children. I cheated foreigners and foreign governments whenever it was in vital U.S. national interest to do so. I stole secrets whenever I could get my hands on them. And when I couldn't, I manipulated my foreign agents into doing the stealing for me. And of course, I deceived the enemy about what I was doing and what the United States was doing. It's always been like this, from ancient times to the present. And it will always be like this. I will concede that spying can be a dirty business. So why did our country do it? Why did Meredith and I do it? First, what's the alternative? no intelligence? Should we rely on overt sources of information and depend on the ethics and morality of our adversaries not to take advantage of us? Would that be real world? Would that be realistic? Would that be safe for our country? Many good people think so. The ends do not justify the means. They are people who are often in the ranks of pacifists, conscientious objectors. They are often people of strong faith, ideals, and personal scruples. They do not believe that spying is ethical, or at a minimum, that spying operations should be drastically curtailed. And I respect those people. They are sincere and honest in their beliefs. And they are entitled to their beliefs. But what if all Americans felt that way? What if we had unilaterally disarmed? What if we had foregone the development of nuclear weapons? What if we had no army? What if we had no CIA? For me, that is a very scary thought. I believe in the just war theory. And I believe that intelligence is an integral part of our country's war-making capability. And Aquinas tells us that in the legitimate defense of our country, we are morally justified in killing an enemy. And I reason that if that is so, that killing can be justified in a just war, then we also are morally justified to lie, cheat, steal, manipulate, and deceive in legitimate defense of our country. Those are lesser harms, aren't they, than killing. I really hope I'm right on this, because otherwise I'm in big trouble. We're fighting enemies that have no rules. They kill Christians. They cut off heads. They burn people alive. So it's very tempting, isn't it, to say that we should fight back in the same way. But if we do that, at what point do we betray the values that we're fighting so hard to defend? At what point do we as a country sell our souls? At what point do we become them? Let's get out of the abstract. Let's look at some specific cases. Real ethical dilemmas are in the specifics. I'm not certain that I mentioned this to Catherine, but I'm going to ask for a great deal of audience participation tonight. I'll be asking you to express your views on what you believe are the proper ethical limits on U.S. intelligence operations. And I'm warning you in advance that these are difficult and highly controversial issues. We won't all see eye to eye on them, but that's fine. We still need to have this discussion. We still need to have this debate. Our country needs to have this discussion. Needs to have this debate. What kind of country are we going to be? In the spirit of the exercise, I'm going to ask that each of you vote yea or nay on each operation that I describe. I realize you want to have all the facts. That, of course, creates some artificialities. But just give me your instinctive reaction on whether you believe the proposed course of action is something that is morally acceptable for our country to do or morally unacceptable. And I'm going to ask that you base your responses on ethics and morality alone. Not any legal or operational issues. Those can be changed. Let's confine our discussion to ethics and morality, right and wrong. What I'll be asking you is this the kind of thing you approve of our country doing? These are real cases. These are real operations. Is everybody ready? Is everybody sufficiently uncomfortable? Remember, I need 39 votes. If you don't vote, I may call you out. Ahmed Osman Saab is a leading member of the violent terrorist group Egyptian Jihad. Saab runs a large cell of this terrorist group in Tirana, Albania. And we in the United States intelligence consider that one of the most dangerous terrorist cells that exist. One day, Saab is stepping out of a taxi outside the Garden of Games, a well-known park in Tirana. As he's paying the driver, Albanian security agents sneak up behind him, slip a white cloth bag over his head, tie his arms and legs with plastic cord, and toss him into the back of a car. Watching and supervising this operation from a short distance away are officers of the United States Central Intelligence Agency. Salah's Albanian captors speed away to an abandoned Air Force base 35 miles north of Tirana. There, Salah is thrown onto the floor of a windowless bathroom and locked in. After 2 days of interrogation by CIA officers and, yes, sporadic beatings by his Albanian captors, Salah is blindfolded, put aboard a CIA chartered plane, and flown to Cairo, where our good friends in Egyptian intelligence are delighted to have the opportunity to interview this leading member of the Egyptian Jihad. In Cairo, predictably, I would even say inevitably, he is subjected to more beatings and torture by the Egyptian authorities. And 4 other Egyptian Jihad members in other cities around Europe suffer the same fate. Again, in kidnappings orchestrated by the CIA. The interrogation of the 5 Tirana cell members by the Egyptian authorities and the military tribunal that follows produces over 20,000 pages of confession transcripts and other documents. And although the confessions were coerced, they are consistent with other information and soon lead to putting the Tirana terrorist cell out of business, saving, who knows, most likely countless innocent lives. All 5 of the terrorists are found guilty and are executed. Now, none of this would have happened without the CIA, without the United States government. So I'm going to ask you, as a matter of morality, how many of you, by a show of hands, would approve of the CIA's role in collaboration with Albanian and Egyptian partners in the kidnapping, interrogation, torture, and execution of the 5 terrorists? How many of you find that action morally acceptable? Show of hands. Thank you. How many find it morally unacceptable? Got to vote. Got to vote here.
I don't have the information. I mean, for example, in order to have an understanding of proportionality, you have to know what this person and his group has done. I don't have enough data.
Yeah, I anticipate that, Father. You can't take it as a given in this scenario that they have killed many innocent lives in Europe, including Americans. These are not innocent people.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out about not so much what they've killed, but what will they kill. It's hard to
I think we can anticipate that these terrorists are likely to continue their terrorist activities and kill additional people, additional victims. Are you ready to vote down, Mother?
More information.
Yes.
This is against your rules. You're setting the rules, but can you vote for the action and not know whether it's acceptable?
Your vote is indicating whether or not you would approve of this action by our country. So you're saying that it's morally acceptable for you to agree to that or morally unacceptable? If your decision is morally unacceptable, then vote against it.
I think it might be morally acceptable, but I don't have enough information.
Yes, go ahead. Okay, I've got the vote tally.
You need to have another vote.
You got another vote? Morally acceptable. Show of hands. Morally unacceptable. Okay.
These are serious decisions that are made, and they need to have serious discernment.
The execution doesn't have to happen.
The execution was the verdict of the court in Egypt.
But you bundled a whole set of pretty different behaviors, right? Torture versus spying, violence.
Yeah, but this is a sequence. This is called rendition. Kidnappings throughout the country do rendition. Is this scenario realistic? Was this scenario real? Yes. All of the questions.
So do we know at the time that decision is made that they are going to be executed?
We don't know that at the time. We do know that there is a likelihood that the Egyptians will torture these people to extract information to prevent future attacks. If this happens frequently, our country is very involved in renditions. Kidnapping terrorists off the street, turning them over to foreign governments for, in most cases, a fatal fate. Okay, major known terrorists. The mastermind of multiple deadly terrorist attacks against America. Think Osama bin Laden. Has escaped our net, found refuge in Yemen where he's being protected and hid by his followers and local leaders. We find out where he's hiding from intelligence sources. We have the capability of sending a Predator drone armed with a Hellfire missile to that location, extraditing him or capturing him is operationally and politically impossible. Our one chance to get him, this Osama bin Laden type, is to use the missile against him. And we know where he is. He's hiding out in an apartment. His technology is horrible. It can ride the cell phone signal directly into his ear as he's on his cell phone. There are innocent people living in that apartment building. Osama bin Laden type terrorist with a missile that will likely kill innocent people in that apartment. Remember, this is our one and only chance to get it. Morally acceptable. Show of hands.
How many people?
We don't know. Morally unacceptable. Targeted killings have been very frequent. We don't advertise the numbers, but there have been published reports that since 9/11, the United States government has conducted some 400 targeted killings, extrajudicially, of terrorists around the world. And there has been collateral damage. Collateral damage is almost an inescapable byproduct, sadly, of this process. Think, for example, of all the innocent people who died in our bombings of Tokyo, of Dresden, Hiroshima, Nagasaki. Think of all the innocent Palestinians who are dying right now because of the Israeli missiles. So collateral damage is fact of life. And it is a horrible calculus that is made by the CIA, by the United States military. The possibility of collateral damage does not automatically preclude the operation. It's this terrible calculus that's made. You look at the so-called importance of the target, the value of the target, as is described, against the likelihood of collateral damage. And if the value of the target is high enough, collateral damage will increase in acceptability. It's the way the military does it, it's the way the CIA does it. The collateral damage is almost always present in operations like this. Because very rarely can you isolate the terrorists from anyone else. And they hide in groups. They hide in apartment buildings. They hide in mosques. A member of Al-Qaeda is arrested as he's entering the United States illegally from Canada in search of his belongings, provides overwhelming evidence that he is involved in a future terrorist attack inside the United States. We have independent information. He knows when the attack is to take place, where, and who else is involved. But he's not talking. How many of you, by show of hands, would consider it morally acceptable to drug this terrorist against his will? Sodium pentothal, sodium amytal, to break down his resistance in an effort to obtain information that could conceivably prevent that attack. Yes, morally acceptable. Morally unacceptable. Okay, thank you. That, of course, would be illegal under our law, but there are some eminent lawyers, politicians who believe that we should revisit that prohibition in the interest of saving American lives from future attacks. Okay, you've seen this one coming. The drugs did not work. He's still not talking. How many of you, by show of hands, would consider it morally acceptable to waterboard this terrorist, to extract forcibly from him the information that could prevent the attack? Morally unacceptable. horrible thing. But the unfortunate truth is that it does work. When we waterboarded Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, he gave information that allowed us to amputate the leadership of Al-Qaeda around the world, and certainly to prevent several future attacks. The terrorist group in Latin America has kidnapped and murdered several American business people, diplomats, their families. Just recently it bombed the U.S. Embassy in that Latin American country, killing 8 more Americans and 20 locals. The CIA is secretly providing equipment, training, and intelligence to that Latin American intelligence service to assist it in fighting terrorism. And as a result, attacks against Americans have dramatically declined. We learn, however, that on some occasions, when the security services of that country capture terrorists, they do not always bring them in for high-risk trials before a corrupt judiciary. In their frustration, they perform summary justice in the field. They execute, violating their human rights by anybody's standards. So my question to you is, would you consider it morally acceptable to allow the United States government to continue to provide training, equipment, and intelligence to that Latin American service, knowing as we do now that on occasion it commits human rights violations? Morally acceptable to continue the cooperation? Show of hands. Thank you. Morally unacceptable. This is a very real dilemma for the United States government because we depend heavily on cooperation we receive from foreign intelligence services. And how many of them do you think have the same standards of human rights violations that we do? If we cut them off, we lose the cooperation. How about the Israelis? How about the Pakistanis, the South Koreans, the Turks, the Egyptians, the Jordanians? These are valuable terrorist prevention organizations that we work with very closely. When President Clinton took office, he decreed that the CIA could not have any relationship with the Foreign Intelligence Service, with any individual, any group around the world that was guilty or suspected of being guilty of human rights violations or criminal acts. That put us on a very high moral pedestal. We did not want to associate with people like that. But as a practical matter, what did that do to the United States intelligence community's ability to recruit terrorists, narcotics traffickers, criminal elements? They're all dirty by definition. And so after several months of realizing that we were depriving ourselves of cooperation from many of our best partners, that policy was changed. The policy today is that when we are working with the Foreign Intelligence Service, we do everything we can to encourage that service, to honor human rights, to respect legalities. But we can't ensure that. What they do behind closed doors, we have no way of knowing. A female CIA officer under diplomatic cover in Rome joins a local tennis club as a venue for spotting potential recruits. And she meets there the deputy chief of mission of the Iranian embassy in Rome, who is an avid tennis player. The Iranian embassy is a known hotbed, a haven of Iranian terrorist activity. There's no question that the DCM, if recruited as an intelligence source, would be invaluable to this. The two began playing tennis at the club, began having lunch afterwards in the club's restaurant. The CI officer tells the local CI chief of station that the Iranian diplomat is infatuated with him. And she knows that she can recruit him by sleeping with him. And she says that she is willing to do that. She also says that if she continues to resist his advances, he will break all contact. How many of you, by show of hands, would consider it morally acceptable to allow the CI officer to recruit the high-ranking Iranian by seducing him? Morally acceptable. Thank you. Morally unacceptable. I would add that the CI is probably the only intelligence service in the world that does not use sex in its operations. There have been exceptions in the past. So we do not use seduction operations. We do not use sexual entrapment. That's not because they don't work. It's simply because on a moral basis we have decided we're not going to do that. We're probably the only service in the world that's made that decision. Our French colleagues think that we Americans are ridiculous, that we are naive, that we're puritanical, and refraining from the technique that they are using so successfully in other services. But that's who we are. We're not going to do it. By executive orders dating back to the 1970s, the CI cannot give its officers cover overseas in certain categories, even though some of those covers will provide excellent access to hard-to-get-to targets of interest. Refugee camps, disenfranchised neighborhoods. How many of you, by show of hands, would find it morally acceptable for the CI once again to be allowed to use journalistic cover? Having our officers pose as journalists overseas, but conducting espionage operations on the side. Morally acceptable to use journalism cover. Thank you. Morally unacceptable. How about human?
Can the people in the front move to in the back move to the front for a minute?
So you see how they vote?
Since I get to see how we're voting.
How about humanitarian aid worker cover? Actually doing humanitarian aid, but conducting intelligence operations secretly at the same time. Humanitarian aid worker cover. Thank you. Morally unacceptable. Okay. How about clerks or missionary? Actually, spreading the gospel, doing good work, we're just helping out our country as spies at the same time. Morally acceptable. Oh. Morally unacceptable.
Might convert. Are they going to reconciliation?
Thank you. Academic club, going overseas as professors to do research. Okay, thank you. 40 unacceptable. Wow, kind of unanimity. The Iranian intelligence service is actively involved in sponsoring international terrorism. A young Iranian intelligence officer is undercover as a member of the Iranian delegation to the United Nations in New York. FBI and CIA surveillance of him in New York reveals that he frequents gay bars and engages in promiscuous homosexual acts. The FBI actually has infrared photographic proof of this activity. Homosexual behavior is criminal in Iran. It's a grounds for dismissal from the service and worse. So the young Iranian has carefully concealed his orientation from his colleagues. How many of you, by a show of hands, consider it morally acceptable for the FBI and the CIA to attempt to recruit this young Iranian intelligence officer by blackmailing him on the basis of his hidden homosexuality? Morally acceptable.
You don't think it's right?
Thank you. Morally unacceptable. Thank you. We've had a major intelligence success. The CIA has recruited an important terrorist member of a cell in Hamburg, Germany. He's providing extremely valuable information on terrorist activities. At one of our secret meetings with him in the State Palace in Hamburg, he asked us, CIA, to provide him with a prostitute. He says he cannot go out on the town himself out of fear that his colleagues would see him. He says if we do not provide that service, he will stop providing information. He will break off contact with the CIA. How many of you would approve of using U.S. taxpayer dollars to procure a prostitute for this terrorist? Morally acceptable.
How much is the prostitute?
Morally unacceptable. That reminds me of a case that we had in New York. We had a very high-ranking Russian who was working secretly with us. He was in a loveless marriage. When he came to us, he said that he desperately needed a woman in his life. He asked us, CIA, to provide him with the services of a security and medically cleared call girl. And that was a momentous decision for us because, as I said, as a matter of policy, we did not do that. It had to go to the White House. The president at the time was Jimmy Carter. Perhaps one of the most moral and religious presidents we've ever had. And Jimmy Carter said to us, now let me get this straight. Do you want me to approve using U.S. taxpayer dollars to provide a prostitute for this Russian? Yes, sir, Mr. President, that's exactly what we're asking. He was providing really valuable intelligence on arms control. Carter loved that intelligence. He didn't want to lose it. So Carter said, what happens if we don't agree? He said he'll probably go out and on his own. He's so lonely, so desperate. He probably will be observed by the KGB and they'll arrest him. He may be rolled. He may He's subjected to some other criminal activity. He may contract some horrible disease. So that's our fear. And President Carter said, we cannot lose this intelligence. So he said, do it. But this meeting never happened. And in fact, the woman we recruited did have a very calming influence on the Russian. It became a staple of the operation.
Was she blonde or brunette?
I've got one more, and then I'd like to open it up for discussion, questions. We recruited a young terrorist with excellent potential access, but he's not yet fully accepted or trusted by the terrorist group. He needs to prove himself. And to prove himself, the terrorists have asked him to conduct a car bombing attack against a local, non-American, a local police official. And once he has done that, he will be fully trusted by the group. His access will improve. He will be in the inner decision-making processes of that terrorist group. If he declines to do that, the terrorist will no longer have anything to do with him, and he will lose all access. So how many by show of hands consider it more than acceptable to authorize the CIA to instruct this young terrorist to carry out the attack? More than acceptable.
What kind of attack?
Pardon me?
What kind of attack?
A car bombing attack. It's going to kill a local police officer. But his value as a source is going to be increased exponentially if he does that. If he passes the proof of loyalty. Morally acceptable.
Is his information going to lead to the direct result of saved lives?
We think so.
But direct, like we know that a threat that he's going to save lives.
His group targets Americans, and he would be in the decision-making process. Morally acceptable. Morally acceptable. Morally unacceptable.
Wow, he has a heart.
Let's recap. By a vote of 36 to 3,
Should I vote for Barry?
you approved the kidnapping and the transport to another service of a terrorist rendition kidnapping. 36 to 3 in favor. By a vote of 11 to 28, you were opposed to targeted killing, presumably on the fact that there would be collateral damage. 37 to 2, you said run away. 23 to 16, you also, by a closer margin, favored waterboarding in an extreme case like this. 16 to 23, you said we cannot have contact with the Foreign Intelligence Service that is involved in human rights violations. By a vote of 13-4 and 26 against, you expressed your disapproval in principle of seduction operations. Journalism cover? Yes, 28 to 11. Human aid worker cover? Yes, 29 to 10. Clergy or missionary cover? No. 12 for, 27 against. Academic cover? 39 to 0.
You wore us down, Jim, and Tommy was raising our hand.
Homosexual blackmail? 23 yes, 16 no. Prostitute? 17 yes, 22 no. Authorizing a terrorist to conduct a bona fides test by carrying out an assassination? 8 said yes, 31 no. Would anybody be surprised by these votes? We're going to talk about it in a minute. What I think we've seen is that good, sincere, well-educated, patriotic Americans of faith can and will disagree on these important issues. And I think our country needs to have this dialogue. We shouldn't be stampeded or frightened into making the wrong moral decisions. Because how we decide these questions will determine what kind of people we are, how we're perceived by the rest of the world. So we've got to get it right. I think what we need above all is a good, thoughtful, nonpartisan debate on what the intelligence rules of engagement against our enemies should be. We don't have those guidelines now. Politicians don't want to touch any of this. They don't want their name on anything that could be used against them politically after the fact. So where does that leave us? We CIA are told, okay, you go out there, you penetrate terrorist groups, you prevent future attacks against Americans. If you don't, we're going to declare an intelligence failure. We will hold you responsible. But oh, by the way, we're not going to tell you how far you can go. But we reserve the right, sitting back in Washington after the fact, to say you went too far. I have friends in the CIA who have been notified by the Justice Department that they are objects of prosecution for things they did in line of duty, mostly renditions, targeted killings, and water wars. All those things at the time were deemed legal and acceptable U.S. government policy. Many of those decisions have been changed, and that's fine. But you got to tell us. You can't leave us to our own devices. That's unfair. And we should be making the decisions ourselves. We're too close to them. We're too prone to overzealousness. We're not directly responsible to the American people. We need our policymakers, our elected officials, to step up and make those decisions for us. And they don't want to do it. Would anybody like to comment on the exercise tonight? Explain your vote on any of these different scenarios?
I just want to say I'm sorry, Mom.
Father, what was your reaction to the voting?
I think that it's difficult because those questions were big questions.
Right.
And certainly the agents that were involved in those questions would have had more information and more time to discern that. It wouldn't have been discerned, and I understand we don't have a lot of time.
Yeah.
That's just our immediate reaction.
Right.
It tells me that the human person must have sufficient time to discern what is objectively true.
Yeah, good point. I did say up front that there are some artificialities,
Sure,
a lot
sure.
of artificialities in something like this.
But I
I
think your exercise showed us how painfully difficult the dilemma is
That's the point.
to be an intelligence person
That's right, Father.
for the United States. Extremely difficult.
And keep your bearings.
And we should respect those in that field because of that dilemma that they bear each day they work.
Well, I sincerely hope that none of you think less of merit than me because we lived in that world. We had to make those decisions. And I was struck by how faith-filled we found the CIA to be. I think Catholics are overrepresented. I think faith in our God and faith in our country often go together. At CIA headquarters, we had cleared priests and ministers and rabbis who came to our headquarters to hear confessions, to conduct religious services, to do counseling. We're probably violating some federal law about separation of church and state, but hey, who's going to know? We're the CIA. But that was something we had not expected necessarily.
You know, what I think is so interesting about that is that you're dealing with big questions.
Yes,
And people of faith deal with big questions.
yes.
And so it seems to me quite natural that there would be many people of faith in that field. Because they grapple with big questions all the time.
Right. Yeah, like your big question tonight. To whom are we going to dedicate our lives to? To the world? Or to God? Yes.
Your relationship conscience come into play, or does that get put in a box of security or government, and they're dictating our actions?
Yeah, I think it always came into play. Now, if you go into the CIA as a nerd like this, you've got to make an upfront rationalization. I'm sure you did too, Paul. You say to yourself, okay, I am a practicing Catholic. My faith is the most important thing in my life. And I realize that if I go into this career, I'm going to do things that I would not ordinarily do. But I believe that I'm doing them for a greater good. I'm doing them to protect the American people, to save lives, to serve our country. We have not dedicated our lives to fighting evil, oppressing, totalitarian, atheistic communism. We thought we were on the right side of that. But some people can't make that rationalization. That's fine, we should do something else. There were only 2 instances in my career where I had a serious moral objection to something that I was asked to do. I could lie, cheat, steal, no problem. That goes with the territory. But once I had a North Korean agent. Probably the most valuable source we had in North Korea, a senior military officer. He met with us whenever he came outside North Korea. He had a universal contact plan. He shows up in Bangkok. He signals for a meeting. We're meeting in a safe house. He wants us to provide him with a child prostitute. And he said if we did not, he would break off contact. There were people in the CIA station in Bangkok who said, we cannot lose him. We have 35,000 American troops at risk in South Korea. We need this source. He said, if you ask me to go back to him and say that we will accede to his request, I resign. That's morally unacceptable, period, no discussion. And that scared the chief of station in Bangkok. And he went back to headquarters, and headquarters came back and sided with me. Said, we will not do that. And I appreciated that. The other operation I was involved in was, he stopped talking to us. And I said to myself, we lose the intelligence, we could riddance. The United States government doesn't be dealing with someone like that. The other instance was, I had a Russian source, a good one, ideologically motivated. He was cooperating secretly with us, risking his life for us because he hated communism. He saw what it was doing to his own people. And very courageously, he decided he wanted to strike back against that. And he thought a good way to do that was by working secretly with the CIA. He was a good man. And he asked me to issue him what we call an L, a lethal device. He wanted to have a capsule concealed in this part of his glasses. So if he saw the KGB closing in, he would have the option of biting off the tip of his glasses. And the poison we use is instantaneous. He could commit suicide. He could avoid his fate, which he knew would be interrogation, torture, giving up information that would invalidate much of what he'd done for us. He didn't want to do that. So he said, give me an L. I believe To me, that would have been tantamount to assisting with suicide. I could not do that. So I went to my superiors and said, I have a moral and religious objection to issuing that because of my belief in the sanctity of God. And then I said, Jim, we don't want you to do anything that would be morally or faith repugnant to you. I was allowed to recuse myself from the operation. I appreciated that. I was not forced to do something that I was so strongly opposed to on religious grounds. It was probably a pointless gesture in many ways because another officer came in and issued me the L. But I respected the CI for not forcing me personally to carry out that action. 2 incidents in a 31-year career. That's not very many. But other than that, I had no qualms, moral qualms about the things that I did, I believe, in the service of our country. Yes, Captain.
So 2 things. Mad respect for you and Meredith for the choices that you have made protecting our country. It's inspiring, but also comforting to know that there's people with great faith who are doing their job. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Catherine.
My question is actually about your children. So you mentioned that you lied to your children. I mean, obviously they know that you work at the CIA now. How did that go over? Like, how did you share that with them, and what was their reaction?
Would you like to tell the story? Or should I?
Oh, go ahead.
Our handless force was maritime serving in Vienna. We were doing there some really aggressive operations against the Iranian terrorists. And somehow these Iranian terrorists found out that the CIA was behind their problems. That I, Jim Olson, was the CIA chief of station in Vienna. So they sent me a letter. And very ominously, they mailed it to our home address in Vienna, where Mary and I were living with our 3 children. These terrorists wanted us to know that they knew where we lived. I'll never forget the letter. I kept it all these years. It started out, Dear Infidel Dog. Don't you just hate letters like that? Oh, you ever get one like that? Frequently. It was a death threat against me by name, against Meredith by name, and against each of our 3 children by name. And that's happened when we felt that we had to tell our oldest. Jeremy was 16. You've got to watch out for your little brother and sister, make certain you're always together, you get on the same school bus, you need to be alert to your surroundings. If anybody's watching you or following or loitering, you've got to get in touch with someone in position of authority right away. That's the one put on 16 year. But Jeremy reacted with pride. He did a really good job of watching out for his brother and sister, and with his help, and a lot of other precautions we put on the children they weren't aware of, we were seeing finish our assignment at Vienna. I can tell you, we all felt a lot better when we got those Iranian terrorists. And then when they were a little bit older, we were able to tell Josh and Helen. And they reacted with pride too. And speaking of pride, if you don't mind, I mentioned how proud Mary and I are of our 3 children. Our oldest, Jeremy, went on to become a United States Marine Corps officer, and then went into campus ministry. Our second son, Josh, was a Navy officer. And our daughter, Hillary, is a missionary in Ethiopia. So we're very when we tell our CIA friends that Hillary is a missionary in Ethiopia, they say, sure. We think she really is, right? Anyway, this is a wonderful group. It's been very uplifting to be all with you tonight. A couple more comments? Okay, we're on time.
If it's coming from Susan, sure.
Thanks, Chris. At the end of your book, Fair Play, you said that you were hoping that there would be a set of moral guidelines that could be put forth for the CIA to help in making these kind of decisions.
Yes.
That was 15 years ago, so has that happened?
It is not, Susan. That was my reason for writing that book in the first place. It was really a plea to the government to tell us the rules. Tell us where that line is. We will go right up to that line. We won't cross it. But if you don't tell us where the line is, our natural reaction is to stay back too far, to avoid risk. And that's not the best way to prosecute the war on terror. We need to be aggressive. We need to be tough. Yes, sir.
Quick question. Do you read spy novels? And if so, who do you like?
I do read them, and I recommend the good ones to my students because you can learn a lot from good spy novels. The early John le Carré is excellent. I think The Spy Who Came from the Cold may be the best spy novel ever written. Tom Clancy has done some good things, but we don't like him because he reveals a lot of classified information. Charles McCary, who just passed away, is the author that we professionals read. He really understands us. He gets it right. Vince Flynn is good. He was a good friend of the CIA. Jason Matthews, a good friend and colleague of mine who just passed away. May he rest in peace. Also wrote the Red Sparrow trilogy, which is good. But there's a lot of junk out there. I tell my students, if I ever catch you reading anything by Robert Ludlum, that is Ludlum has no clue. Yes.
Jim, just a quick question. Did the CIA ever try to implement or reject something that 27 years of my experience in military intelligence we used to get between the policymakers and the implementers, which was like, targeting boards and committees and people who did have guidelines and worked in a world that allowed that to be a little bit obfuscated, so it wasn't just immediately apparent. In other words, they didn't have the same kind of reaction that a politician would have if exposed.
No, we didn't have that. In fact, we in the CIA envied you military people because in the military you have rules of engagement. You are subject to very strict laws and conditions. We did not have that. And we wish we had. We would like to have something comparable to what you just described. But it unfortunately doesn't exist.
Tim?
Okay?
Jim, just a couple weeks ago, Pat and I had the opportunity to meet with Mike Pompeo,
Yes.
and had the head of the CIA and the Secretary of State. As we were leaving, we got to see his office, I believe, there were 5 ex-Suburbans. He was in the middle one. One of them had to roll down the window. There was a guy with automatic weapon.
Yeah.
So, to what extent does someone who had been head of the CIA continue to have protection in their private life?
And we don't have protection, but when you come out from undercover, as American I did, you potentially could become a target. And so we stay alert. There have been a couple incidents. The FBI's been involved, local police have been involved. There are a lot of crazies out there. A lot of terrorists out there. If they want to strike back against the CIA, that's hard to do because we're invisible. We're inaccessible. If you have a couple people walking around openly in College Station, Texas, who admitted they were in the CIA, you better be careful. I never answer my phone unless I know who's calling, because I get these crank calls. I get these harassing calls. There was a fellow not too long ago, mentally ill, who said, I'm coming to College Station. He lived in Illinois. I know where you live, and I'm coming after you. That's unpleasant. But let him try.
Pepe, did you have a question? Over there?
Yeah, I just asked him, how do you recruit your CIA young people? What do you recruit them, or they actively seek you out?
Both ways. I was actually approached by the CIA, very compliant. And so we do it both ways now. I will tell you, he says proudly that the University of the United States of America, that today produces more recruits for the CIA by far than any other, is Texas A&M University.
Also more free.
Tom, last question.
Tom spies. People think I'm an overachiever.
Speak up, Tom. You're in a pretty dark place. Most people think he's no picture sideways. So you have to go through kind of plan your life.
Yeah, that's a good question because this is a very high anxiety career. There's a lot of stress. And we are very aware of the fact that some of our people need counseling, need help. I think we are very open to that. I think we are like a family. If you're having marital problems, if you're having anxiety problems, if you're having financial problems, drug problems, alcohol problems, we'll take good care of it. I know Mary's okay. Father, would you like to comment?
I'm kind of okay.
Okay. Thank you all very much.
Say, as the president, it feels good that Catherine and Scott brought you here. This is a testament of our program and what we strive for. I'm so glad we had, 4 guests here tonight to witness that. So hope people will leave you alone after this and let you eat a little bit. So thanks again for that. Next meeting is June 16th. It's going to be again here at Grand Duca, if that's where we're going. We're going to have Chris Bartlett talking about reaching young people. Bartlett?
Bartlett, that's
Am I saying this right? Yep, right here at Grand Duca. Father, you want to go and close this out?
Yes, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly hosts, by the power of God, thrust into hell Satan and all evil spirits who wander through the world for the ruin of the souls. Heavenly Father, we give you thanks for tonight. We thank you for Jim and Meredith. We thank you for their service to our country, which in many ways has put them into extremely difficult situations. Their sacrifice is something that we are grateful for because it has saved people's lives. And so we ask your blessing upon them for their generosity, and we ask that you protect them so that they will continue to live out their lives in peace and in joy. We also ask your blessing upon all those who serve our country, those in the military, and those who are in the CIA. Oftentimes they might find themselves feeling alone and unappreciated. And so we ask your blessing upon them tonight and console them if they are feeling unappreciated. We also ask your blessing upon each of us as we now go home and go our separate ways. Give us safe passage home and a good night's rest so that we can get back up tomorrow morning and get about the business of building up your kingdom. We make this prayer as always in the name of Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. The Lord be with you. And with your spirit. May Almighty God bless you, the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Go in peace.
Thank you, God. Godspeed.